So I really, oh, I forgot to remind you. There we go. I appreciate you all taking the time to join me because I know you're all quite busy. I hope that you find tonight's presentation worthwhile and that you come away with a deeper understanding of your child's unique needs and the ways that you can better support their confidence and autonomy as much as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. So let me just introduce sort of outline for tonight's presentation. I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself and the research that forms the basis of this presentation. Then we'll have a look at what empowerment means generally before looking at specific types of empowerment and how these relate to your autistic child. I'm operating under the assumption that a lot of people here are parents or carers of autistic girls. This might also be applicable to you if you're a practitioner working in the field as well, but the language that I use is very much about empowering your autistic child. So then we'll have a look at some of the things that your child is likely to experience and the way that these connect to empowerment and how empowerment practices can help alleviate these challenges for your child. I then want to look at emotional regulation. So that's that heading there, conceptualizing regulation and developing coping strategies. So this is connected to meltdown and shutdown and developing coping mechanisms to deal with difficult emotions. It's a big thing for autistic girls, especially trying to regulate emotions and dealing with emotions that feel quite big, quite intense. And then we'll talk about identity development, namely identifying your child's unique strengths and values and how they can use these strengths to build confidence and self-assurance. And then finally, we'll move on to friendship challenges and discuss ways of keeping your child emotionally safe within relationships, which again is quite a big topic. So we won't have time to explore all of it, but hopefully give a good overview. So let's start by setting our intentions for today's workshop. It's my hope that today's workshop will give you a sense of your child's experiences and help you feel more confident in helping them overcome the challenges that they might face. So we're going to do this by exploring common experiences faced by autistic girls and trying out specific tools you can use to help them overcome these challenges. I will be asking you to join in with some of these activities, so it might be useful if you've got a pen and paper handy, or if you're on a desktop or laptop, a digital notepad of some sort, just to note down your thoughts. So I'll start by introducing myself a bit. So my name's Cloie Parfitt, and I'm a neurodivergent psychotherapist providing support to autistic adolescents and adults online and from my home in Norwich, where I also provide animal-assisted therapy with the help of my two guinea pigs, Minka and Maya. You can probably see them behind me, actually. I think they're both out at the moment having a bit to eat. So I first recognized my own neurodivergence when I was completing my initial practitioner training as a therapist. And after my own negative experiences of therapy, I began to contemplate how counseling and psychotherapy could be adapted to best suit autistic clients. So it's kind of coming up against some issues in therapy that I wasn't quite able to work through. And I quite quickly realized that I needed a slightly different approach. So my own experiences really impact my own practice as well. And obviously my research in the area also has a big impact on my practice. I do run quite a number of therapeutic groups as well. So my most recent thing is I've been running a therapeutic book club that is for late diagnosed autistic adults exploring themes around neurodivergence. So that's been quite interesting. My therapy practice is trauma informed, meaning I remain cognizant of the role of trauma in quote unquote mental disorders and distress. And my work is also neuroaffirmative, which means I take a strength-based approach to neurodivergence. And I view autism as a difference and not a disorder, and my therapy practice reflects this. So moving on, I'll tell you a bit about my research because that has had a lot to do with the presentation today. I've recently completed a professional doctorate in counselling and psychotherapy at the University of Edinburgh. And when I say recently, I mean, I received my award on Monday. So officially over. But yeah, that was quite an interesting experience. And I really derived a lot from that research. So my research looks at trauma in autistic women and girls and provides indications for best practice for mental health practitioners working with this group. It examines both the types of experiences experienced as traumatic for this population and the factors aiding their recovery. So looking very much at how can therapists best support autistic clients who have experienced trauma and adversity, which unfortunately for many of us is quite common. So my work is intersectional, acknowledging the elevated risk for trauma and adversity in autistic women and girls, given their marginalized position in society. Something that's quite interesting and is relevant to this presentation is that the empowerment process was seen to assist the recovery process by restoring survivors' confidence and control over their lives and restoring a coherent sense of identity. So some of the things that participants were coming to interviews with, so prior to starting therapy, they're talking very much about this kind of disruption of identity and also seeking a sense of belonging. So we will talk a little bit about that and how that relates to your autistic child. And this presentation is based on the findings derived from my research and also my own experience providing therapeutic support to autistic women and girls, which makes up the vast majority of my practice. I work primarily with autistic girls aged anywhere from about 13 to 21, but I work with adults as well. I work with quite a lot of late diagnosed autistic females. So this presentation is derived from both research and experience. So let's start by conceptualizing empowerment. Empowerment's a word that gets thrown around a lot in society, particularly within the last few years. But many people really struggle to identify what empowerment actually is and the ways in which it affects our well-being. So at a very basic level, empowerment refers to the process of becoming stronger and more confident, especially in controlling our life and claiming our rights. So this is very, very specific to autistic girls, because if you think about different support needs and things that autistic girls might need, it's about being able to advocate for those needs and step into our power and claim space in society. So it's very much about harnessing the power that we all have within us to create the life that we want and accomplish what we set our minds to. It's particularly important for marginalized groups like autistic individuals who may experience a relative lack of power in society. So if you think about people who are marginalized, maybe they face different barriers than people who are neurotypical, for example. And there are several different types of empowerment, but today we'll be focusing on psychological and social empowerment. So let's take a look at psychological empowerment. So this is what most people think of when they consider empowerment. It's the process of strengthening feelings of confidence and control over someone's life. It's also linked with self-esteem, which is the confidence in one's own worth and ability, and self-efficacy, which is one's belief in their abilities to achieve the goals they set for themselves. So we'll be looking at psychological empowerment today, and also social empowerment. So social empowerment is the act of learning of ourselves through connection with others and establishing a sense of belonging to a community. This is particularly important for marginalized groups, again, like autistic individuals who might feel a lack of belonging in certain environments where they may feel different from others and their needs are unlikely to be met. So social empowerment is very important for autistic girls, in my opinion, and my research reflects this as well. So having a sense of belonging and being able to learn about ourselves through connection with others. So if psychological empowerment is possessing a feeling of autonomy and control over one's life, and social empowerment involves having the opportunity to explore our own identity through connection with others, let's have a think about the ways in which common experiences encountered by autistic girls may be experienced as disempowering. So this will set the stage for exploring how we can enable the empowerment process for autistic girls by addressing some of these issues. So we're going to start by looking at emotional regulation side of things. So things like meltdown, shutdown, burnout, and alexithymia, which is difficulty recognizing and naming emotions. It's perhaps easy to see how these experiences can feel disempowering to autistic girls, as at the very heart of these experiences is a lack of control over one's emotions. And speaking from my own experience, this can be incredibly intimidating. You're receiving this influx of emotions that you can't interpret and you don't know how to regulate. It's very unsettling. So understanding these phenomena and having tools to deal with these experiences when they arise is crucial to restoring feelings of safety and control. So that's going to form the bulk of my presentation today, is actually how do we help autistic girls regulate? And actually that can be very empowering to have a feeling of control and autonomy over our reactions and our emotions. So let's start by defining emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is, put simply, the ability to manage our emotional state. It's something that autistic people do struggle with for a variety of reasons. It involves both the process of identifying emotions and using coping strategies to diffuse or moderate difficult or negative emotions. While many autistic individuals experience difficulties regulating emotions, it's possible to develop these skills and help your autistic child control this process. And this is a lot of what I do in my therapy practice, is just sitting down with autistic girls and saying, okay, well, what is it that you're feeling? And how can we regulate this? How can we work together to give you a sense of control over these emotions? And understanding them and learning to sit with them and tolerate them is the first step. And that can be scary, very, very scary, especially since autistic individuals might feel more intensely. So when speaking about emotional regulation, it's important to consider your child's window of tolerance, which is the optimal zone of arousal for effectively managing and regulating one's emotions. So we're looking there at that green zone there. That's our window of tolerance. So within this zone, the child feels comfortable, they feel calm, they feel in control of their feelings and emotions and reactions to these sensations. And then as we start to enter the orange zone here, that's when we're starting to become dysregulated. Okay, that's when these emotions are starting to feel quite overpowering. We're not quite sure what to do with them. We can start to feel like our emotions are beginning to run away from us, right? Maybe we notice our heart rate increasing, maybe our palms become sweaty. Okay, so that's the orange zone there. We're starting to feel a bit out of control of our emotions. And then you look here at the red zones. So they're at the top and bottom. These represent shutdown or meltdown, which are a response to sustained stress, extreme emotions, or uncomfortable sensory stimuli, or a combination of all those things, right? So we enter the orange zone and we don't take steps to regulate our emotions or change our sensory environment, then we might find ourselves in a meltdown or a shutdown, right? So in some cases, shutdown can be a response to meltdown, where a person might become emotionally dysregulated and temporarily withdraw from others in their environment in an attempt to cope. So imagine lots of you will have experience with this meltdown, shutdown, and something that I hear a lot from the parents of the children I work with is they're really looking to better understand these experiences, right? So I've chosen to spend a bit of time on this because it can be quite overwhelming as a parent. It's overwhelming for the child, but it's also incredibly overwhelming for you as the parent if you don't understand what's going on and you see your child in such distress. So the important thing here is to notice the arrows around the window of tolerance. So these indicate that, yes, our window of tolerance can shrink, especially if we're, subjected to sustained stress or feel bombarded by sensory stimulus. That can shrink our window of tolerance, right? We might find that we're not able to cope or regulate as easily as maybe we were previously able to. But we can also work to expand this window of tolerance. That's the important bit. There's hope. We can expand this window. So let's spend some time thinking about meltdowns and shutdowns, because I feel like this is really important to understand as a parent or a carer or someone working with autistic individuals. So the important thing to remember about both shutdown and meltdown is that they're each a response to extreme stress or overwhelming emotions. While meltdowns involve outward expressions of distress, shutdowns are more internalized. Okay, so your shutdowns, quite often you might not recognize that someone's experiencing a shutdown, whereas meltdowns are much more externalized, much more explosive. And then at the other extreme is burnout. So we talk a lot about burnout in my practice, for example, and in helping people prevent burnout, because it can be quite distressing when it does happen. And burnout is a response to sustained stress. So again, coming up against an environment that doesn't meet our needs, increase sensory stimulus, that's sustained over a long period of time, might lead to a burnout. So it's very much to do with stress caused by having to navigate a world that's out of sync with our needs. So things like masking, sensory challenges, unreachable expectations, difficult life transitions, these can all lead to a burnout. So it's very important to recognize that and take steps to prevent that. So let's have a look at each of these things and the ways that you can help your child manage these states of dysregulation. So first and foremost, we have shutdown. And I've got the little image of the computer there, because that's very much what it can feel like when you're experiencing a shutdown. It's just no longer responding, right? You might find that your child, they can't communicate with you. They may go catatonic, so they might not move. They might lie on the floor completely still. This can be quite distressing as a parent, okay? So I'm going to try and help you understand that a bit better. So the important thing to recognize is it's a response to an overwhelming situation in which a person completely or partially withdraws from the world around them. So they may no longer respond to verbal communication. They might be unable to move. And the way to help this, and quite often I hear this from my autistic clients, is when I'm experiencing a shutdown, my mom keeps asking me, how can I help you? How can I help you? And I can't respond. I don't know how she can help me. And again, for you as a parent, that's quite distressing, right? You're desperate to help, you don't know how to help. And unfortunately, the autistic individual quite often isn't able to tell you. So they may be completely unable to communicate at all. So it's important to avoid asking questions. That will most likely increase the stress response for that individual. Give them space and time, and reduce sensory input where possible. So uncomfortable sensory stimulus is a cause of shutdown quite often. So we really want to try and limit that as much as possible if we find ourselves in a shutdown. So maybe turning off the lights, turning off the telly, trying to manage our sensory environment as much as possible. And then the ways to help meltdown are very similar. But meltdown is a very different response to a similar situation. So again, it's a response to an overwhelming situation in which a person temporarily loses control of their reactions and behavior. So this loss of control can be expressed verbally by crying, screaming, shouting, or physically. So people might lash out, they might kick, hit, bite. And again, that can be distressing as a parent, but it's important to avoid asking questions. Again, that's not going to help the dysregulation that they're experiencing. Give them space and time again, and again, reduce sensory input where possible. So as much as possible, trying to reduce that unpleasant stimulus. And then finally, we've got burnout. So this is a heightened stress response, and it's a physical and mental fatigue characterized by a decreased ability to manage life skills, sensory input, and social interaction. I think this certainly can happen for autistic young people, but what you'll find also is it tends to happen a lot in adulthood as well, where maybe we have more responsibility, more expectations, more demands on us. So ways to help burnout: first and foremost, reduce the need to mask. So masking and camouflaging are contributors to burnout. It's very exhausting to try and keep that up, to try and continually mask and hide our authentic reactions or ways of interacting with the world. Allowing time for special interests. So special interests are a superpower for emotion regulation and happiness. I think the more we can engage with the young person's special interests, the better, really. And so when you find yourself in a burnout, or your young person finds himself in a burnout, encourage that time on special interests. That's going to give them the time to recharge that they need. And then again, decreasing sensory input. So unpleasant sensory experiences are also a catalyst for burnout. So we want to really work to soften the sensory environment for the young person. Reducing obligations. So again, burnout happens when maybe there are unreasonable expectations or demands placed upon us. So we want to really try and limit obligations as much as possible, and help to manage the young person's expectations of themselves. So a lot of the autistic individuals I work with, young people, are very perfectionistic. They want to succeed, and quite often they're talented academically, and maybe they've got quite a lot of their identity is wrapped up in achieving, and that can be difficult to sustain. So we want to try and help the young person manage their expectations of themselves as much as possible. All right, let's see. So this is the first exercise that I want us to do this evening. So it's incredibly simple, but it's also extremely helpful in assisting your child to both identify when they're feeling dysregulated and take steps to regulate difficult emotions and feelings. So I should say ahead of this, I've spoken to Kathy earlier, and it's going to be, so I'm going to email both the copies of the slides to you and also the worksheets that correspond with these activities that we'll be doing together. So you'll have it all there to draw upon in the future. So this, again, this is a really simple exercise, but it's really helpful in helping children identify when they're feeling dysregulated, and also identify steps that they can take to regulate themselves. It involves naming these expressions in their own words, identifying when they would typically feel these things in their day or week, and naming the things that they can do to regulate and cope. And you can create your own version of this quite easily, or the young person can create it themselves, just drawing a few faces, kind of transitioning from quite happy and content to, okay, I'm feeling quite dysregulated now, which is represented by that red face there. So the green smiley face, so again, going back to that window of tolerance there, the green smiley face represents finding ourselves within that window of tolerance. So we're feeling connected, we feel safe, we feel able to regulate our emotions, okay? And the yellow and orange faces indicate when we're beginning to find ourselves outside of that window of tolerance. So regulating emotions becomes very difficult at this point. So the idea is that the sooner your child is able to recognize they're outside of their window of tolerance, the sooner they can take steps to regulate themselves. This is really important as it can be difficult to regulate once we find ourselves in the red zone, right? So once we're in shutdown or meltdown, it's really about managing that situation. So we want to prevent that as much as possible. It's really not fun for the young. It's probably even less fun for you, to be honest. So let's see. Yeah, so when we find ourselves in the red zone, we're going to work to recognize the signs and prevent this as much as possible. It's a skill that takes both patience and practice, but it can be helped tremendously by this simple exercise. And it's the sort of thing that your kid can draw upon in the future, keep a copy of it and keep it around. And when they start to feel dysregulated, they can refer to it and say, oh, right, well, I've already identified that when I feel this way, I can do this, and this will help me regulate myself. So let's have a look at an example. So this was taken from my work with one of my clients who very graciously agreed to let me use her own worksheet to show you all. So here you can see that she's named each of these emotions or zones and identified both when she's likely to feel this way and the steps she can take to help regulate once she begins to find herself outside of her window of tolerance. You could even go a step further with this if you wanted to, in that you can ask the young person to identify the feelings in their body at each of these stages and help them identify the emotions relating to these sensations. So thinking again about alexithymia and that difficulty both feeling and naming or labeling emotions. This is quite useful for that. So looking at not only, okay, what am I feeling here? When am I likely to feel this way? But what am I feeling in my body just now? Where do I notice that anxiety? So an example would be, if you feel a fluttering in your stomach or your chest, that's indicative that you're probably feeling anxious. You might be feeling quite nervous. And that's something that you can do with your young person. You can help them work to identify these emotions. So we'll just have a look through this. So you can see there where she's put things that can help her when she begins to feel mildly upset, for example. So things like reaching out to a friend, talking to my parents, listening to music, drawing or painting, spending time in nature. And this all came from her. She was able to identify this on her own. And that's really empowering for young people, that they can say, okay, yeah, sometimes I feel dysregulated, but I have steps that I can take to manage this for myself. And that's at the core of empowerment, isn't it? Is that autonomy and feeling of control. So then again, so we go to the extreme there at totally overwhelmed, what she's called totally overwhelmed. I feel this way when, so this is when she's feeling shut down, she's having a meltdown, or she's completely burnt out. And again, she's identified the ways that she can help herself in this situation. And she said, spending time on special interests. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe not when you're in a meltdown or a shutdown, but certainly in a burnout, spending time on special interests can be really, really helpful, really therapeutic. Asking for help, that's a big one. And knowing when to ask for help and being comfortable asking for help. We'll talk a little bit about assertiveness later on in this presentation, and that very much relates to that comfort with asking for help. And then getting out of the stressful situation and finding a safe space. So again, it's about monitoring that sensory environment. Okay, so before doing the previous exercise, I would typically brainstorm with the client what activities they enjoy. So thinking very much about self-care. So thinking about the things that they can draw on when they're determining these steps that they can take to help themselves regulate. So quite often I'll generate a big list of activities like the one here, and the child can choose from this list with the knowledge that they can add their own activities as they choose. So I want you to have a look at these coping mechanisms. And let's think about our own coping mechanisms. So as a parent, it's important that you have your own coping mechanisms and prioritize your own self-care. It's like the air stewardess always say, you have to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. So I want you to have a look at this list. What on this list stands out to you? Are there things on here that you could also draw on to help yourself regulate? What might you add to this list? Is there anything that comes to mind that you do to help yourself regulate, or something that you do for self-care? And I'm going to ask that you just pop any ideas that you have in the chat. So I'm hoping that we can share ideas together, and then you can take these ideas forward as you explore your child's own coping mechanisms. So feel free to be creative with this. Not everything that works for one person will work for everyone, and that's okay. Perhaps I'll just start us off. So when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed and I feel myself entering the orange zone, I deliberately stroke my guinea pigs, which sounds a bit silly, but the feeling of their fur is really soothing, and the presence helps me remember that I'm safe and I'm loved. So that's my 2 cents. So I'm interested in hearing from you guys.
Chloe,
Ooh.
I don't know if you can see the chat, but there's lots and lots in the chat now. We've got
Yeah.
piano, going for a run, putting my head into my dog's fur. Yeah, I do that too. Listening to music with earbuds, spending time with my horses, stroke the dog, walking, gardening, yoga. Are we allowed to say eating some chocolate? Of course we are. Yes, absolutely.
Of course.
Music, take a nap, sewing, running, walking, book in for a massage. Well, that sounds nice. Actually, no, actually, that doesn't sound nice to me. I don't know why I'm lying. I don't like massage. Tidying. Well, I'm very interested in that one. I wish that I liked to do tidying, but I don't.
Love to tidy.
Listening to a podcast, writing poetry. It's very creative.
Ooh, yeah.
Long bath, gin, reading. Wow, I didn't know there were this many. Paddleboarding, hot shower. Okay, and then there's 32 messages down there. Glass of wine. There we go. Let's end that one.
Okay, yeah, painting by numbers. That's a very good one. Listening to audiobook, yeah, podcasts. Yeah.
It took 4 years for my daughter to start doing all of the adult coloring books that I got for her when she was in really bad burnout. So don't give up. It might take some time, but you might get there in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it can be really hard for the young person to find the energy to do anything. And this is quite often something I come up against in my therapy practice is, yes, it takes energy to do these things, but also we get energy from doing things we enjoy. And that's what's really difficult in burnout or depression, is to recognize that, yes, I'm going to have to put forth some effort here, but actually there are things that I can do that are energizing. Like for some people, seeing a close friend might be quite energizing. You know, you might feel that you get a bit of a kick from that. Yeah, we've had a few podcasts. That's a really good one. I hadn't thought about that. Coloring app. Okay. Word search, crochet, sticker books. Yes, absolutely. Laughing. Yeah. Yeah. Writing music. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So lots of ideas here. And I hope you've got your pen and paper and you can jot some of these down, because it's quite helpful to throw out some ideas for your young person. You know, what is it that they can do that brings them joy and that can help them regulate when they're feeling stressed? Word games. Yeah. What's the thing? Wordle. That's it. That's a big one just now, isn't it? Language app. Yeah. Duolingo, that sort of thing. Absolutely. So you guys are full of ideas. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So sitting down and thinking about this with your young person, what do they like to do? And maybe pop that in the chat as well. What does your young person enjoy doing? Do you have any ideas that maybe you could share with other people? Making bracelets, gaming, gymnastics, crochet. Yeah. Lego, swimming, watching YouTube, Roblox. I've forgotten about that one. Bubble tea. Yeah. Absolutely. Diamond art, TikTok music. Yeah. Phone. Yeah, I feel that. Reading familiar books. Yeah. Comfort shows are a big thing. So watching the same show on repeat, I'm really bad about that one. Sims. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well done, everyone. Thank you so much for your ideas. I hope that's given you some ideas that you can use when exploring coping mechanisms and self-care with your child.
And
So I'm
Zoom will record the chat, so I can collate all of these ideas. And when I send the slides to everybody, I can send these ideas as well.
Oh, great. Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, well done, everyone. Okay. Oops. Let's see. Okay, so I want to move on to a specific exercise that you can do with your child when they begin to feel dysregulated. So there will be times when your child is maybe unable to do some of the things that help them regulate. For example, if they're at school or they're away from home. And this is an exercise that you can do with them to help bring them back into the green zone from orange. And after doing this together a few times, your child should be able to recreate this for themselves on their own, right? It's very simple. It's not difficult. I'm going to walk you through it. So it's called a safe space visualization, and it's what is known by therapists as a grounding technique. So that's a way of managing challenging emotions by redirecting our attention to the present moment. Grounding techniques often involved directing our attention to our senses as a way of increasing our awareness on the present moment. So often when we're anxious or we find ourselves ruminating on past experiences or worrying about the future, it can be really helpful to just redirect our attention to the present moment, right? We can get so caught up in that thing I said, especially as an autistic person. Always, always. That thing I said, I really put my foot in it. I'll think about things that I said 7 years ago, right? And also worrying about the future. And I'm always blown away by how much young people worry about the future. You know, they've got the stress of exams, their mocks. It's very stressful for young people, and they can find themselves in this cycle of ruminating about the future and really worrying about it. And so redirecting our attention to the present moment can be really useful. So I'm going to guide you through this exercise. So first and foremost, I want to invite you just to find a comfortable position, okay? Notice what it feels like to be sat where you are just now. Notice your weight on the chair or the couch or the bed, wherever you might be sitting just now. Yeah, take a few minutes just to focus on your breathing, okay? Feel the air moving in and out of your lungs. Close your eyes. Soften your gaze. I want you to become aware of any tension in your body. Okay, where are you holding that tension? Maybe in your shoulders, maybe in your jaw, you feel quite tense. Yeah. Now I want to invite you to let that tension go with each out breath. So breathing in and breathing out. And as you breathe out, really working to let that tension go. Yeah, so in through your nose, out through your mouth. Nice deep breaths. Now I want you to imagine a place where you feel calm, peaceful, and safe. So for me, this is the forest. That's why I've chosen the picture that I have for this slide. Yeah, that's what helps me feel regulated and safe and calm. But yours might look a little bit different. Perhaps it's a meadow. For a lot of people I work with, it's their own bedroom. Yeah, because within that space, they can monitor their sensory environment. They've got control over their sensory environment, and all their favorite things are there. What's not to love? So maybe for you, it's your bedroom or a familiar room in your home. It could be a place you've been before. Could be somewhere you've dreamed about going to, somewhere you've seen a picture of, or just a peaceful place that you can create in your mind's eye. So I want you to envision that place, okay? Keep noticing your breath as you envision that place. In through your nose, out through your mouth, letting that tension dissolve with each out breath. I want to invite you to look around in that place. What colors do you see? What shapes? What do you notice around you? Now notice the sounds that are around you in this place, or perhaps the silence. Maybe there aren't any sounds. Notice those sounds that are far away and those that are near to you. Those that are more noticeable and those that are more subtle. So where I am just now, I can hear the birds. I can hear the wind rustling through the leaves. Now I want to invite you to notice any smells that you notice in this place. So if you find yourself in a meadow, maybe you can smell fresh cut grass. Yeah. What do you notice about those smells? And keep focusing on your breath. Now direct your attention to any skin sensations that you might feel. So the earth beneath you, or whatever's supporting you in this place, the temperature, any movement of air, and anything else you can touch in this place. Notice the pleasant physical sensations in your body whilst you enjoy this safe place. So while you're in this peaceful and safe place, you might choose to give it a name, one word or phrase that you can use to bring that image back anytime you need to. Yeah, so it's a bit more accessible to you. What words do you attribute to this space? Keep in mind that you can conjure this space at any time. When you feel dysregulated, maybe you feel overwhelmed emotionally, you just need a break, maybe work feels like too much, you can conjure this place at any time. You have the power to do that. And you can choose to linger here a while, enjoying the peacefulness and serenity, or you can leave whenever you like, just by opening your eyes and being aware of where you are now and bringing yourself back to the present moment. Now I want to invite you to softly open your eyes, reorient to where you are just now. I wonder how that felt for you. And how do you feel just now? Maybe pop it in the chat. What was that like for you guys? And how do you feel?
Chloe, we do have a question about aphantasia, and can this be adapted for people who can't visualize something in their mind?
Mm, yeah, that's a good question. So I think if it's difficult to visualize in your mind, I've got another exercise for that actually, and that is the five senses exercise. So it's very much about tuning in with the senses around you, so you don't have to visualize a place, right? And I will include that exercise when I send through the slides as well, because that's a good point. That's a really good point. For some people, it's very difficult to visualize, isn't it? Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat just now. Oh, someone's gone to a cave, nice and dark, really calm. Okay. Oh, that sounds lovely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some people said your mind was wandering. That's normal. That's okay. Don't be hard on yourself. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. Okay. It really does. People said it was soothing, relaxing, calming. Lovely. Yeah. So this is something you can do with your young person, and I'll send through the script as well. So you've got that. You can do it together. I think that especially can be really, really therapeutic for young people, is to have your support in that. And you can learn together, which is a really beautiful thing. Oh, someone went to the beach, waves washing over your feet. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of noise around. I understand that. That's difficult, isn't it? Yeah. Could easily nap. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all for giving that a go. It could be a little bit intimidating. So well done for doing it. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to change tune a little bit here. And I want to bring us back to these common challenges faced by autistic girls. Okay. This time, looking at those that impact identity and belonging. So masking, camouflaging, isolation, friendship issues. And thinking again about social empowerment, it's perhaps easy to see how these issues might be significantly disempowering for autistic girls, as these issues deny them the opportunity to learn about themselves through connection with others. Masking and camouflaging, and this was a big feature of my own research. Masking and camouflaging can actually be seen as detrimental to identity functioning, as the autistic person may hide or deny certain aspects of their identity to fit in or assimilate, right? So a lot of the people that I spoke to for my research, they were all adult autistic women. They talked about reaching adulthood and never really feeling that sense of belonging. And actually their autism diagnosis gave them that. It was very empowering that they could connect with other people with similar issues and similar ways of perceiving the world. And many autistic authors speak about the chameleon effect, or the autistic person's propensity for taking on the characteristic of those around them while denying their own wants, needs, and desires. And Tony Atwood talks about this a little bit, and I spoke to him about this personally, and he was talking about that need to assimilate, and actually that people can be quite there's a propensity towards people pleasing and trying to please people around us, because we've spent so much of our lives not fitting in, that there's this real desire to connect almost at any cost. And unfortunately, that's at cost to our own identity quite often. So this was a big theme in my research. And the following quote was actually taken from a participant interview. So she states, "I also completely forgot myself. I had no sense of identity. At the time, I was very much a chameleon, and I think that it's only now that it's become clear, after the PTSD has been resolved, that this is not just a result of PTSD and having a lack of identity. It also ties in with the whole being autistic and wanting to fit in. In that, I was a chameleon. I would find out subconsciously what a person wanted from me, and I would then take on that role. And if you'd asked me at the time what my favorite food, flowers, music, or anything was, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. It was whatever the person I was trying to make like me wanted. If they liked something, I did, so on and so forth. So how do we help autistic girls feel socially empowered? How do we help them feel secure in their identity and establish a sense of belonging? Well, it starts by helping them to think constructively about their own identity. What makes them unique? What sets them apart from others? What are their own unique strengths and values? This will be the focus of our next exercise, which involves identifying our own strengths and thinking constructively about how we can utilize these strengths to help us through adversity. So, excuse me, we're going to start with a thought experiment, followed by a guided reflection. Then we're going to select our strengths before thinking together about the practical applications of these strengths or how we can utilize these strengths in our daily lives. And again, we're going to do this together. I think by doing it yourself, you'll be in a better position to do this with the young person that you're supporting. So this might seem very simple. It's a very simple exercise, but actually the act of slowing down and naming our strengths in a structured way and through conversation with a parent or carer can be a very powerful process. Okay, so if you've got your notepad and pen handy, you don't have to write it down, but it might be helpful for you to write down so you can come back to it later. I want you to imagine you're being celebrated at a big ceremony and someone's giving a speech in your honor. First, decide who the speaker is going to be. A family member, a teacher, someone else? Who would you have speak on your behalf? Who knows you very well? Then imagine in detail what you would want the speaker to say about you. You can also think about what you wouldn't want them to say, okay? So spend a few minutes thinking about that. So you're being celebrated, someone's giving a speech. What would they say about you? What would you want them to say? So take a few minutes and maybe jot that down. I'm going to give us 1 minute for this, okay? I think that's probably enough time. It's okay to not know, Rachel. I'm just reading the chat. That's okay. Yeah. And maybe 1 minute is not long enough. This might be something that you sit with for a while. Okay. So hopefully that's given you enough time to consider this. So step 2, this is a guided reflection. So think about what your best friend or your closest family member would say they like about you. What personality traits do you admire in people that you respect or your heroes? And what do you like most about yourself? Going to give us a couple minutes again to consider these, okay? Just write down what comes to mind. The sort of thing that we don't need to overthink. I'm just seeing a chat earlier. So someone asked, how long might burnout last? Could it start in September and still be happening in April? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, burnout can last weeks, months, years. Yeah. How are you finding this exercise? Maybe it's a bit uncomfortable. Think about what people might say about you. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on just for time's sake. So that was step 2. This is step 3. Bear with me. So have a look at the strengths listed here. Which ones do you identify with? And maybe this is a bit easier because you've got them in front of you. Yeah. Which ones do you identify with? So list as many as you feel apply, and then choose one to take forward for our next activity. When you're doing this with your child, absolutely let them pick as many as possible. Yeah. It's great if they can identify lots of strengths, but for time's sake, we're just going to take one forward. Okay. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do that. Okay. Gonna move on now, again, for time's sake, just aware that we've got a few more things to get through. Okay. So I want you to consider how these strengths help you at school or work. For the young person, it will most likely be school, but I've added work as we're the ones doing this exercise. How do these strengths help me at home? How do these strengths help me in relationships? How can I use these strengths to achieve the goals I set for myself? And in what situations might I need to be reminded that I possess these strengths? So I'm just going to work through an example, just because that could be a bit helpful. So let's say someone identifies persistence as a key strength. So how does this strength help me at school? Well, maybe it enables them to get their schoolwork done, even when it feels difficult. And how does this strength help me at home? Maybe it enables someone to keep their space tidy caring for their pets and animals, finishing homework. And how does it help me in relationships? Well, persistence can help get through tough challenges in relationships, can help me persevere even when things get tough. And how does the strength help me achieve the goals I set for myself? So maybe persistence enables us to work at goals consistently and not give up when things get hard. And in what situations might I need to be reminded that I possess this strength? Maybe when I'm facing a big challenge and I need to be reminded that with persistence, anything is possible. Yeah. So that's just an example. And obviously you'll spend a lot more time with your young person doing this, because I imagine hopefully they'll identify more than one strength, and you can help them think creatively about that too, and maybe some strengths that you've identified that they have. So this particular exercise is very beneficial because it helps the child realize that they have internal resources that they can use to help them in difficult situations. And it also builds their confidence in their own strengths and abilities. It's a very positive process, and it's nice for the child to consider what makes them unique and special. Again, the process of doing this with your child shows them that you care and that you're with them on this journey, which is priceless. So now we're going to do a similar exercise, but this time we're going to work with our values. So put simply, values are fundamental beliefs that guide or motivate our attitudes and actions. They're an important step in identity development as they help determine who we are and to whom we belong. So I want you to take a minute or two to consider your own values using the prompts on this slide. Consider what values you've taken from your family. What values did you inherit from your own parents? What does society value? And do these align with your own values? What are the values you want to live by versus the ones you actually live by? So this can be really powerful for autistic young people. Quite often when I do this with people, they're able to identify that actually my values are not aligned with society's values. For example, society might value productivity. Maybe that's not a value that I acknowledge as important to me. And maybe society values beauty, for example. And maybe that's not something that really matters to me. So actually identifying society's values and how our own differs can be quite empowering. It's a way of saying, actually, this is what I stand for, and I don't have to align with society's expectations. So take a minute or two just to consider these. And again, I'll send this to you so you've got the worksheet to do with your young person or on your own. Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think my daughter would engage in this as an exercise, but I think we could discuss aspects of it on a walk or something. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So for some kids, this will work. They're quite keen to sit down and do it. For others, you might need to tailor it a bit, maybe just have a conversation, but it's a conversation that I would encourage you to have. All right, I'm going to move on now. And just remember that you'll get these slides so you can do this at a later date as well. So when you're reflecting with your child, I want you to think about, what are the similarities? So where do your values align with society's or with your parents' values, for example? And where are the differences? How did it feel to do this exercise? And what have you learned about yourself from this exercise? How does it feel when your values are not aligned with others' values? That's an important one. Yeah. And you'll notice that we end each exercise with a reflection. And this is because building a habit of reflection helps your child to increase their awareness so that they can more easily problem solve in the moment. So that helps increase their autonomy and their ability to think critically for themselves. So with everything we do, there's always a reflective exercise at the end. Okay, now we're going to move on to thinking about friendships and some of the challenges associated with friendships for autistic girls. So this is quite a broad topic. There are a lot of different directions we could take this. So I've chosen to focus on an issue that I see a lot in my practice, and that's particularly challenging for autistic girls. And that is empathizing or over empathizing within friendships and relationships. I imagine we have a lot of autistic girls with us on this call, and you'll probably identify with this. I imagine that kind of propensity for really picking up on the energy in a room or taking on others' emotions. It can be really, really difficult to manage. So let's start by defining empathy in simple terms. So put simply, empathy is the ability to understand and feel what another person is experiencing. There's a common misconception that autistic people lack empathy, a viewpoint that's beginning to change thanks to the work of autistic self-advocates. What we're actually beginning to realize is that autistic people have a lot of empathy, sometimes way too much, which can complicate relationships and friendships. This is something that I see consistently in my own practice, where autistic girls might pick up on other people's emotions so intensely that they might actually confuse other people's emotions for their own. And this is where the concept of emotional boundaries comes from. In my practice, I'm all about boundaries. I talk about boundaries all day, all night. My clients are probably sick of hearing it. So thinking about emotional boundaries. So that involves separating our own feelings from another's feelings. So that can be really challenging when you have increased empathy. So violations of emotional boundaries involve taking responsibility for others' feelings and sacrificing our own needs to please others. You might remember what I said about people pleasing in autistic girls. That's a lot of us have a propensity towards people pleasing. And that's because we're desperate to fit in, right? Quite often we experience that marginalization or feeling on the fringe. So there can be a real desire to connect and actually maybe abandon our own boundaries for the benefit of others. So an autistic person's increased empathy may mean it's more difficult to separate their feelings from those of others. And we can address this issue by turning into our own empathy and moderating it in a way that still encourages emotional connection, but also keeps us safe. So I'd like to introduce us to our next and final exercise, and that is what I call the empathy dial. This is a really helpful tool for both recognizing that the level of our empathy, recognizing the level of our empathy, so where we're at on this scale, and moderating it to a level that's manageable to us, right? And that can be really empowering because quite often we can feel bombarded by other people's emotions and these intense emotions and struggling to separate them from our own. That actually tuning into our empathy and moderating it can be a really powerful process. So I'm going to guide you through this visualization now, similar to the one we did before. So I want you to find a comfortable place. And I'll also send you this script as well, so you can do it with your young person. So I hope you found a comfortable position. I want to invite you to soften your gaze just now. You can close your eyes or not, whichever feels comfortable for you. I want you to take a few settling breaths, noticing the sensation of air moving in and out of your lungs. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Very good. Now I want you to tune in to how empathetic you're feeling just now. Where are you at on this scale? I want you to imagine a stereo with a volume dial numbered 1 to 10. Now set the dial to whatever number you feel your empathy is currently at. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. Maybe you're at a 5, 4. Maybe you're dialed up to 10, empathizing with me and giving this presentation. Maybe you're picking up on my nerves a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so set the dial to whatever number you're currently at. Now I want to invite you to turn the volume down 1 notch. Just 1 notch. How does that feel? What emotions come up for you as you tune that dial down? And what senses are you feeling in your body just now? Now I want you to consider what it might feel like to turn the volume back up with the knowledge that you can turn it down again at any time. And remember that you can imagine this dial anytime and adjust it as you need. I want to encourage you to consider what level would be most of service to those around you just now, but most importantly, yourself. Consider your own emotional capacity just now and the amount of empathy you feel able to extend to others in this moment. So maybe you're feeling a bit burnout yourself. Maybe you're a bit overwhelmed, tired, fatigued. So maybe dialing that empathy down is a way of protecting yourself, keeping yourself emotionally safe. In what instances do you think you might need to dial down your empathy? So that's an example, right? When we're feeling overwhelmed, we feel like we're running low ourselves. We don't have the energy to extend to others. Maybe we can dial our empathy down in those instances. And in what instances might you need to dial up your empathy? When might it be useful to empathize with someone strongly? Yeah, so just consider this and set your dial to where you feel comfortable just now in this moment. And feel free to open your eyes now and reorient yourself to your surroundings in your own time. I wonder how that felt for you. Was it uncomfortable? For some people, it might be a bit uncomfortable. We can feel discomfort with asserting our emotional boundaries, with saying, actually, I need to dial down my empathy just now. And the important thing about empathy is that when we over empathize, we're not helping ourselves or the other person, right? So while empathy is a really good thing, it's a really powerful tool that we can use to connect, over empathizing doesn't help us, and it doesn't help the other person either. It leaves us feeling depleted and exhausted. So this is an example of something you can do with your child. You can even create a dial if you wanted to, use things that you've got in your home to create a little dial and say, right, I'm going to set my dial just now to a 4 maybe, or a 5, and help your child consider when it might be useful for them to dial up or dial down. So this is really common in friendships. I see that a lot of autistic young people will over empathize and maybe lose sight of those emotional boundaries. So this can be a really powerful tool. So a lot of the things that we've spoken about today are about building our awareness of our internal feeling states, our values, our emotional boundaries. And through that awareness, being able to take actions to help us manage difficult emotions and keep ourselves safe. So the last thing I want to leave you with is this idea of assertiveness. And that is the ability to speak up for ourselves and communicate our own needs and boundaries. Building assertiveness helps people stand up for themselves, build confidence, and have positive interactions with peers. It's an important skill for forming balanced and positive relationships in which they can meet their own needs and the needs of others. So some ways that you can help your child build assertiveness. So assist them in learning to identify and communicate their needs, right? This is really important, especially for individuals with additional support needs. Thinking, okay, well, what is it that I need and how can I communicate that? How can I assert my needs? Help them feel comfortable saying no and practice saying no. Yeah. So not overcommitting to things and saying no when we feel uncomfortable. And help them avoid the temptation to apologize. This is something I come up against a lot in my practice. Seems like some autistic girls may fall into the trap of over apologizing. And this can sometimes stem from having needs that differ from others. So that act of saying, well, actually, I'm not sorry. I haven't done anything to feel sorry. And really resisting that temptation to apologize for things that are out of our control. That's part of being assertive. And finally, help your child feel comfortable asking for help and knowing when to ask for help. Okay. So I want to leave you with that. So think about the ways that you can help your child practice assertiveness and how they can communicate their own emotional boundaries. It's all about helping your child build their capacity so that when they face situations without you, they're able to navigate and manage them successfully. And this helps them increase their feelings of autonomy, control, and emotional well-being. Okay. So I want to thank you all for spending the evening with me. I know that you're probably all very busy. I really hope this webinar has been helpful and thought-provoking, and that you've come away with some tools to help your young person and feel more informed about their experiences. I want to welcome you to reach out to me. If you want to get in touch, let me know how you found the presentation. You can also follow me on social media. I share mental health content specific to neurodivergent individuals, so you might find that quite useful. And I want to finish with a final chat exercise. So I'd really love it if you could put in the chat one thing that you'll be taking away from you from this session. So either something that you've learned, something that's really resonated with you, or an exercise that you're going to try with your young person. So just pop that in the chat if you don't mind. What will you take away from this presentation? Take time for me, absolutely. Validation, understanding. Talking to my daughter about her strengths. I love that. Yeah. So often autism is talked about in terms of deficits. And actually, there's a lot of strengths to being autistic, and increased empathy is one of them. Yeah, looking at strengths. Yeah, you can dial it down. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't have to feel super empathetic all the time. Yeah, thinking about regulating strategies together. Yeah. So there's probably things you can do with your young person that helps regulate you both. Yeah, assertiveness. Yeah. Talking about strengths. I'm seeing that a lot. That's great, guys. Yeah. Emotional boundaries. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Just looking again. So lots about boundaries. Yeah. I'm seeing that the empathy dial was helpful for people as well. I'm glad. I'm really glad.
Chloe, someone was asking, could you go over again about building up a habit of reflection?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Go back to that slide, perhaps. Oops. Give me just a moment. I'm just trying to find the slide. Bear with me. Okay. Yeah. So building a practice of reflection. So that helps your child. So I suppose we're talking specifically about identifying strengths, weren't we? And also values. So building up a habit of reflection helps us think more critically about our own abilities and how we might navigate these situations. So you'll notice that after every activity that we did together, we had some reflective questions. So it's very much about, well, how did I experience that that exercise, and what can I derive from that, those feelings that I had? So for example, when we were doing the empathy dial and I asked you, well, how did you feel when you dialed the empathy dial down? So sometimes when I do this with young people, they'll say, well, I felt a bit guilty. It felt wrong, and that reflective practice is useful because what does that tell you? That tells you that actually I'm uncomfortable not empathizing. I feel a need to empathize. So that kind of feeds into that people pleasing again, doesn't it? Of, right, well, I've got to empathize. I've got to get it right. So building that reflective practice tells us more about ourselves. So every time that we do an activity like this, I always add in reflective questions, and they're simple. Quite often they're quite simple. So just, how was I feeling during that exercise is a good way. So I would encourage you to do that with any of these exercises with your young person. Is just feel out, well, how did that feel for you? And why is that? Why were you feeling that way? What does that tell you about yourself?
So we've only got time for a couple of quick questions. Well, maybe only one question actually, because we're nearly at the finish time. Oh, the clock is ticking down as I look at
I
it.
know it.
So somebody asked a little while ago, how do you get your child engaged with this if they are depressed or they're in burnout and they really aren't engaging with anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. So quite often if I'm working with someone that's in burnout or shutdown and they're not able to engage in this sort of exercise, I'll quite often use special interests. So, and also working with films. So watching a film and thinking about maybe just having a conversation about it and saying, well, what were the values of the main protagonist, for example, and do those align with my own? So it can be quite subtle. You can find opportunities for this sort of thing in everyday interactions. It doesn't have to be a sit down formal exercise. But hopefully this has kind of stimulated some ideas for you in the ways that you could do that with your child. But I understand not everyone is going to feel able to engage with that fully. So it's about finding little ways in other ways.
And we often have conversations like, well, that makes it sound like we talk like this all the time. Of course we don't. But when we need to have conversations like this, going for a drive is a good space to do it in, because you're not looking at each other. There's no eye contact. You can say things to people that you might otherwise not say when you're not facing each other. So that's always a good way.
Yeah. I'm just seeing where someone said, your daughter won't say anything positive about herself. Yeah, I work with that a lot. So sometimes it's you yourself helping them identify these strengths and traits and giving them examples of how they exemplify those. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult for people to do that for themselves. Sometimes you've got to be that active participant.
Okay, and the last question is going to be something about how do you get school involved in helping your child when, they're not really getting any support from school?
That's very challenging. Yeah. I wish I had an answer for that. I really do, because that's something that I struggle with in my own practice as well, is trying to get schools on board. Um, yeah. Do you have any ideas about that, Kathy?
Um, Ultimately, you can't force school to be on board, sadly. We often tell people to send them our white paper, which is available on our website. It's called Autism Girls and Keeping It All Inside. Lots of schools have been sent that and have read it. It doesn't mean that they're going to act on it, sadly. It's very much a lottery. It's a lottery on whether you have staff that are invested in learning more. It's a lottery in how much money they've got, how much capacity they've got, how many staff they've got, come to that. And it is very, very difficult. But there are, you can go for an EHCP, an education, health and care plan. It takes a long time. You can still get it if school don't really agree with you. You can apply for it yourself. Go to the IPSEA website, IPSEA. IPSEA charity has lots of information and templates to help you apply for an EHCP. Ultimately, we have a lot of people in our Facebook group who remove their children from school and home educate. I can't say to you that that's what you should do, because obviously I have no insight into your own personal experience. I have no insight into whether you would be able to do that because of work capacity, etc. But there comes a point, and you probably will know when you get to that point, when the crisis of being at school outweighs the benefits of being at school. And I hope that when you get to that point, I hope that you will know it.
Yeah, I work a lot with young people who leave school. Yeah.
Yes. But if it makes anybody feel better, my daughter was very much in burnout 5 years ago, and didn't go to school for about 18 months. And then we did get an EHCP, and we got a place at a lovely, nurturing specialist school, which had only 30 young people in it. And they were wonderful. And she went back a year, and she ended up getting 7 GCSEs, one of which she got a grade 8 for. We never imagined that would happen at that point. We did years before, but at that point we never imagined that would happen. And she's now at a mainstream college with a lot of help with the full-time one-to-one. So things can get better. If you're in the depths of despair at the moment, I've been there, I understand it, but things can get better. So hold on to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. We are 4 minutes over, and that's very naughty of me. I do try to end these webinars on time, so I'm going to stop now. Thank you everybody for coming and giving up your time this evening. We have recorded this, and we will put it on our YouTube channel with all of our other webinars. And Chloe will send me the slides and the worksheets. Not worksheets, that's not the right word, but whatever we're calling them. She will send them to me, and I will pass them all on to you. And I will also collate all of those ideas from the chat earlier. So thank you very much, Chloe, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And Chloe is actually trying to start a group for us locally to her. So let's have fingers crossed that is actually going to happen. And now people will want to know where that is.
It's in Norwich.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everybody. And
you.
we'll see you at the next one. Bye.